as I mentioned, we have these 50 companies in our mastermind groups, and every mastermind meeting somehow comes around to recruiting and retention. And we were just down in Orlando, Florida over this past weekend with our strategic growth mastermind group, and that's 15 companies. And 80% of our discussion was around recruiting and retention. We were in South Bend, Indiana, a couple of weeks ago with our top 5% group, and a significant part of their conversation was around caregiver recruiting and retention. One of the differences between the companies that are growing during this COVID crisis and the companies that are either not growing or that have declined in revenue is their ability to find and keep caregivers. And as we've looked at these big companies in the top 5% group, they have, most of them have grown their revenue in 2020 over 2019 during COVID. And of all the members of our group, 69% of them grew their business in that time frame, and the average revenue growth was 14.4%. 23% of our members declined in revenue, and the average decline was 12%. And then there's 8% that were in the middle that were basically flat. So when we looked at the growing companies compared to the shrinking companies, the big difference was their system for recruiting and retention. And it starts with their company culture, creating a great place to work, having clear values, and being able to communicate that to their potential caregivers, and then having systems that involve more than just putting ads in Indeed.com. As you know, Miriam, from the benchmarking study, the number one online source for caregivers is Indeed.com. And what we know is that the best caregivers in the country are not on Indeed every weekend looking for more work. They're already happily working for someone else. And so these companies have figured out how to attract new applicants in spite of the shortage, and how to get them on board quickly, and then how to keep them. And we've been doing a lot of work around improving 90-day retention, because again, Home Care Pulse data showed that 81% of turnover happens in the first 90 days. And so we've really been looking at what can we do to improve 90-day retention. And many of our members have been applying those principles and have been successful in doing that. And so having those systems in place is what enables those companies to grow. Second part of your question is about office team disruption. And what we are seeing is that the companies that have been acquired that have the highest value or the highest multiple of EBITDA are those companies that have a solid leadership team in place, and the leadership team agrees to stay with the buyer. And so I mentioned that we have had 4 of our companies acquired by home care assistants. 3 of them, the chief operating officer or the president of the company being sold agreed to stay with the company for some period of time. And the times are variable, but everybody agreed to stay at least a year. One company that was a smaller company, the owner and the COO both exited the business. And so I don't know much of the details of that, but I think it illustrates part of the point of your question is that if you are growing a company with a plan to exit, putting in place a team of people who can run the business in your absence, and then if that team of people will stay with the new buyer, that increases the value of the business.